Was Abraham Lincoln onto something when he assembled his team of rivals cabinet out of former political foes? Should companies cede a good chunk of their business to copycats and look for new ways to keep customers' brand loyalty? Kenny Ching, assistant professor of strategy and entrepreneurship in the business school at WPI, recently had 2 papers published teasing out counterintuitive threads from team dynamics in esports and product counterfeiting in the plastic model kit space. He says the novel findings can be applied to a wide range of settings, from boardrooms to locker rooms to store shelves and Amazon carts. Ching's first paper, published in Organizational Science, was an outgrowth of previous research he and his colleagues have published on team dynamics in esports. The new paper asserts that the familiarity you gain by going up against a competitor is more valuable than the familiarity you get from being someone's teammate.
So this paper is really a labor of love. It began around 2017 or so. We first had a paper published, also in Organization Science, and in that paper, basically we made use of a data set where we collected information on teams playing this esport, electronic sport, or computer games in layman term, called Defense of the Ancients. Typically, we would think that to make a great performing team, you want to have team members knowing each other as well as possible. And the way to do that, you will make them work together on many projects, and then hopefully as they develop rapport and so on, they get better and better, right? Now that's one way. The other way could be, what if they knew each other through competitive settings where they were competitors before, right? So maybe in a tournament, in a game, or in a match, and they were rivals or competitors, and that is also providing information to each other. And then what we found is that players who are able to compete and cooperate with each other over millions of times, because sometimes you're in the same team, sometimes you're on an opposing team. One of the things, the mechanisms that we speculate is that the way that we perceive a person differs according to the circumstance they're in. And in a competitive sort of setting, maybe you could be getting more information that you could be making use of in the future, right? Simply because it's a competitive setting. So you're observing your opponent a bit more closely than you will be observing your teammate. And that helps when you subsequently become teammates with each other.
The game Ching and his colleagues studied, Defense of the Ancients 2, is a multiplayer affair that has grown into a high-stakes esports playing field. Ching and his colleagues based their study on several years' worth of data on matches involving the game.
So the game itself goes back at least 20 years, right? But the current iteration that we play is called Defense of the Ancients 2. And it's a very popular esports game. So people literally compete for millions of dollars. Essentially, it's like 2 teams of 5 each. They'll be competing to defeat each other and accomplish a set of objectives. And in the process, as teammates, you have to really cooperate to try to achieve certain objectives because it's difficult. The game itself is very high skill level. So it really entails cooperation and coordination in order to achieve the targets, right? And the unique feature of this game is that because there's so many players in the world playing it, people literally log on and play a ton of games a day. And there's a matchmaking facility within the game that randomly allocates players to form teams where they could be playing against each other. And because of that, you have many repeated experiments where you could be both teammates with other players as well as opponents in the future with the players. So we can look at it literally a ton of, repeated experiments where you could see, wow, do you gain more from being teammates before, or do you gain more from being opponents? And it's a really cool setting for us to test certain things.
He said the paper's findings have implications in sports, politics, and corporate environments.
This paper basically I think it's one of the first that really talks about this concept of competitive familiarity. And it's something that we think is pretty novel in the way that we're thinking about trying to get a high performing team together. So politics obviously is an obvious application. And I think we could see as well that in recent years, political rivals, when all the dust is settled, maybe to come back together to form a team together. So that could be one application. But I think in a more general corporate sense, increasingly we're seeing corporations incorporate the ideas of doing in-house tournaments, where, for example, you could have in-house teams competing to be the best one that would take charge of a certain project, right? So that's one way that we're thinking that corporations could leverage this mechanism so that they build greater rapport among their employees. Another way is that you start thinking that the concept of a team A versus team B, red team versus blue team sort of concept, it applies a lot to like cybersecurity. Where you're thinking about that, okay, so let's say if you're a cybersecurity firm, you're trying to make a good system, you want to test that system and how well it is. Maybe you can set up tournaments where one team is a hacker, the other team is a defender, and then you set up a competitive dynamic so they're competing against each other, but then eventually when they all work together to create a system, hopefully that through those competitions, they're going to have better understanding of each other as teammates and the performance.
In his second recently published paper, Ching argues in Research Policy that manufacturers plagued by the rise of counterfeit products can adjust their product lines to focus on less expensive ways to appeal to customers. For this study, Ching focused on Gundam, a hit Japanese television series featuring futuristic giant robots that started in the late 1970s and spawned a wildly popular collection of plastic model kits produced by Japanese toy giant Bandai. In a case of perhaps falling victim to its own popularity, the Gundam kits are widely copied, and it's sometimes hard to tell the difference between the fakes and the real thing. What Ching found through the Gundam study was that manufacturers may be able to offset losses to counterfeit sales with innovative approaches to aesthetics and incremental upgrades.
In this paper, we chose the setting of plastic models. So specifically plastic models of this giant robots, very popular, called Gundam robots. These plastic models are subject to a very high level of counterfeiting. And what we found is that the level of counterfeiting differs by the way that they characterize the new releases that they do. So specifically, what we found is that it's counterfeited more if companies do both quality innovation as well as aesthetic innovation. And so because of that, and we know that quality innovation, which typically entails making more high-tech products, is more expensive from the perspective of the company compared to just changing the aesthetics, which would typically be just changing the color, maybe making just small changes to the way that the product looks. That's typically cheaper to do than doing quality innovation, which is like maybe creating really new joints, incorporating new plastic molding technologies and so on, which requires a lot higher investment from the company side. What we would be suggesting is that maybe companies could be thinking carefully about what they should be doing in the future. Should they definitely go for quality innovation, or maybe they could pare back and just only do aesthetic innovation, right? Given the fact that they know that they're going to be counterfeited.
A longtime Gundam model builder, Ching said he's already started to notice tweaks to the product lineup, suggesting parent company Bandai is trying to stay one step ahead of counterfeiters.
As they say, if you're doing something there that's your hobby, maybe there's no work to be done, right? Because I love making these models, and that's what sparked my interest in this several years ago. What I did notice is that as a longtime fan, some of these higher end models, there seem to be less and less over the years. And I'm a purist. I love making the really high end models, and my first inkling is that, wow, I wish they're doing more. But then as a researcher, my natural interest was, why are they making less? So I started doing a little bit of digging, and then I decided that, hey, sounds like a cool project to investigate, because there's real ramifications for corporations dealing with these sort of pressures. And so we started collecting data. What's difficult about collecting data in this particular project is that it's very difficult to get a counterfeiting data. And so with a team of research assistants, we spent literally 2 years really digging through the archives, quote unquote archives, to find all the counterfeit products of these plastic models. And then later on, we basically fitted econometric models to try to get at some of the results.
Ching said the implications of his study go far beyond niche model kits. Companies of all shapes and sizes are facing the same challenges in dealing with copycats.
In any white goods industry, we're seeing this, right? Where you have really iconic products from big brands, they immediately pretty much copy it right away. Like, for example, think about the coffee maker, right? You can think about the way the French door design of the fridges, right? Refrigerators. All these were very rapidly copied, but they probably took a lot of investments to get to that point where they could create a product like that. If you are one of these companies that think about creating iconic, original, high quality products that requires a lot of investment to get there, should every product be like that? Knowing that everything is going to be copied really quickly? Or maybe I could create more of a portfolio of products where you have a couple which are highly iconic, high investments, but the other products could be much more around just changing the aesthetics, not focusing so much on quality innovations.